Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy New Year. Happy belated New Year. We are so excited to kick off our first webinar of the year, I think on a very timely topic. And we want to thank ahead of time Todd, Brian, and Ellen for joining us today. So our topic is the state of hiring for 2024 from an executive search perspective. And an executive search perspective is welcomed because usually executive search, they are early readers of what's happening in the market. So we are delighted to have them on board, and we will get started shortly. So our agenda for today is very simple. We are going to introduce our panel and have them tell a little bit about themselves, what practice areas they focus on, what industries, and what type of roles that they play, what type of roles they hire for in that industry. And then we will get into the meat of the presentation, which is, what is happening in the market? What are they seeing? What are some of the trends? And then one of the things that we would like to do also is demystify executive search a little bit. How does one work with an executive recruiter? How do we get some recruiter's attention? And once we have that attention, how can we maximize those conversations? So I'd like to turn it over to our wonderful panel and welcome them. And I'd like to ask you, Brian, if you could start and let us know a little bit about who you are, what's your practice area, what kind of roles you recruit for. And so thank you. I'll hand it over to you.
Well, I appreciate that, Elizabeth. Thank you for inviting us. This has been a couple of years in the making. We've done several of these. My name is Brian Joyce. I'm with Korn Ferry. I'm in my 19th year at the firm and 26 years in executive search. I would characterize that as focused predominantly in healthcare. I work at the VP level and above, and within healthcare, functionally across the board, from finance to head of quality and med-econ, you name it. So functionally, I'm broad-based, but I'm more specific to working with private equity-backed healthcare providers and health plans. So that's been my area of expertise and something I've enjoyed.
Thank you so much for that, Brian. Todd, would you like to go next and tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. So Todd Mayer, I'm at Spenser, Stuart, and I sit in our firm's Boston office. I've been here at the firm about 15 years and all within our financial services practice. And I lead a lot of our asset management work here in the US. And what that practically ends up meaning is lots of work with both traditional and alternative asset managers in a whole array of roles, from senior investors to senior operations and other C-suite leaders within those categories. And I do some work outside the US, but mostly within the domestic market here. And my earlier background was in banking and consulting, and excited to have the dialogue here today.
Well, we're delighted to have you here. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce you to Ellen, who is also an alum of SOM, and we're happy to have her here with us. Ellen?
Yes, so I graduated SOM in '98. And I started at the time at SOM, I was interested in sustainability and did consulting in that space. And about 19 years ago, I founded my search firm focused on sustainability and ESG, impact investing. We've been doing more work in the finance sector lately, but a lot of work has been around responsible supply chains and climate change, basically sustainability, broadly speaking.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. And we hope that this session will be interactive, so I won't be calling on anyone specifically. I'll start you off the conversation, but I hope that if you have something to say, something to add, please go ahead. So obviously, the state of hiring. We want to know what you think 2024 will look like based on what happened in 2023 and how the year ended. So I'd love to hear from all of you. What are some of the early reads in the market? What are you hearing? What are some of the trends? And are there any bright spots that you're also hearing about? So I'll let you, Ellen, start if you'd like.
Absolutely. So I think it's industry specific, and I think consulting has been hit really hard. And certainly retail, tech, apparel, those industries have been hit hard. And there's there's geopolitical factors, the economy, and so overall business was really strong for us in 2022 and not so much in 2023. And we're seeing that, I mean, it's early days. We're only a couple of weeks into 2024, but I do see indications that it's better this year than last year, but not as good as the year before, somewhere in between.
Well, better sounds good to me. What about you, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that. I think looking back at 2023, we had thought within asset management that it was going to be a really tough year. Just kind of given a lot of sort of the macro factors, whether it was interest rates or other things, that was going to really depress hiring, and it didn't. It wasn't as big of a year as 21 and 22, which were our firm's biggest years within financial services, and probably a lot of overhiring. So there was a pause that needed to happen, but 2023 was better than we expected. And I think what's been puzzling to me in the last 3 or 4 months is, a lot of the macro factors have become clear. They've gotten better. Certainly not, a completely clear picture at this point, but hiring within Spenser Stuart, within my category, slowed October through December. Sometimes it sort of naturally will with the year end coming. I think we have a strong pipeline right now, and we've got good visibility on what it should look like. So my sense right now at a really early stage is that 2024 will probably look like 2023, which was strong. It wasn't completely frothy like 22, but I think we're going to have a strong year here. It's just gotten off to a bit of a slow start.
Okay. That's good news for asset management. Brian?
I would mirror that. We also saw slowing in the healthcare arena end of Q4 because of just the evaporation of budgets and the uncertainty at a macro level. Coming into the new year, we typically see mid-January through end of February as sort of conversations start becoming a little bit more plentiful, projects start to take shape. So I think, at least in healthcare, we're going to see a lot of M&A activity. I think organizations are still going to have a laser focus on trying to remove cost, and that's going to utilize, and I know we'll talk about this in a few other areas, automation, AI, and just how do we bring down total cost of care. And I think also a trend we're going to see on the talent front is people have become very used to working remotely, and we're seeing a lot of employers wanting to get back into an in-office environment. So we're going to have a natural friction there of coming back to the office, relocating, just because of interest rates and the inconvenience about relocating. More folks don't want to, and more organizations want their executives in-house for that culture building. So that will be an interesting dynamic as we see unfold.
So I would summarize that it sounds like a more positive year overall for healthcare and asset management, and also for sustainability. So that's certainly good news for our audience. And I definitely want to touch on the remote working, because lots has changed and continues to evolve. And that was a topic that I think we touched on last year. But before we go to that topic, I wanted to start demystifying what executive recruiting does, executive search brings to the table, and how do candidates engage with executive recruiters. And one of the things that I think is a mystery for a lot of our audience is the mechanics of executive search. What's the difference between a retained search person, a boutique firm, a large firm, contingency, because it makes a difference as they're reaching out or someone reaches out to them. So I'd love your thoughts a little bit. If one of you wants to take a shot at answering the question about retained, what does that mean? And sort of what are the expectations of people who engaged in the candidates? Anyone want to take that? Brian?
Sure. So a retained search firm is an organization that a client seeks out, an organization seeks out to bring their expertise on board. So we engage in so we're paid up front, I guess is the short version, to spend the extra time to understand culture, the competencies, the job profile, and really work hand in glove with an organization to make sure that we are both aligned for success in identifying in the market individuals that will align with whatever functional need they have. A contingency search firm typically more aligned with job seekers and aren't paid until they place the individual. So they're at risk for that. And then those individuals can work with multiple firms. So it's just slightly different. They're typically contingency firms are at mid-level management. You don't see them as frequent in the senior level positions because it's not as strong of a recipe for success.
Thank you, Brian. And Ellen, I know you run your own boutique firm. I think it would be interesting for our audience for you to also talk about the nature of a boutique firm as opposed to working one of the larger firms like Heidrick and Spenser, Stuart and Korn Ferry.
Right. So we call the big firms the Shreks. So that's Spenser, Heidrick, Russell Reynolds, Aegon, and Korn. And we are a boutique search firm. So it's my firm, and we have 3 recruiters. So I don't know how many thousands are at your firms, but we're very niche. We're very focused specifically on these the recruiters that have worked with me. We're just focused on sustainability, and we really know that niche. And professionals, sustainability professionals know us. Also, we have these long-standing relationships for this very niche focus. So we're able to just have a very aligned mix and very much a relationship, one-on-one relationship with our clients that's based on my relationship or with our recruiters.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving us the nuances of boutique large firms. So I'd like to segue now into, helping our audience work with executive recruiters. What do you think, what would be your advice to our audience as they're trying to engage with executive recruiters and get the attention of executive recruiters? What are some of the things that they should know up front?
Sure. I can jump in so I look at engaging recruiters as a marathon. It's a long game, right? So typically we reach out to individuals in a market to network, to help solve projects that our clients have engaged us. If you get a call from a recruiter, even if you're busy, even if you're not looking, I would highly recommend returning the call, trying to network, build rapport, get your name out there. And also, if you're looking to find a recruiter and you have no sort of leads or nowhere to start, ask a mentor. Even if you're doing a career pivot, your mentor or somebody you trust in the organization or another company, they've likely worked with recruiters. And even if it's an industry pivot, a lot of the large firms, will be able to refer internally. So it's really just building the relationship little by little over time.
Absolutely. And it is a marathon, not a sprint. Todd, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, I think, I encounter a lot of people, whether it's former classmates from school or socially, that, you get a lot of information, you get sometimes a lot of inbound from recruiters. And of course, you're not going to have the time probably to respond to everyone, but I think trying to be thoughtful about who are the recruiters that play in my space. And even if you are so happy and not even contemplating a change in the near term or even medium term, I think there's a lot of course I'm biased, but I think there's a lot of value in having these relationships, even if just informationally, knowing what's going on out there, who's hiring, what's happening. You can get refreshed on compensation in terms of knowing some of those trends along the way. And you obviously, you never know what the future is going to hold. And so, it might be 3, 4, 5+ years down the road, but having those relationships can be really beneficial to, as you're thinking about different steps in your career. And to echo Brian as well, of try to be helpful when you can. And again, you don't have infinite amount of time, but when you do get outreach for a particular search, try to help if you can, in the sense of connecting that recruiter to people in your network that you think might have an interest. And I think it could pay a lot of dividends over time. So I just, echo a lot of what's been said already.
Thank you. Ellen, did you want to add something?
Just that we're all retained recruiters on this call, and we are working with our hiring managers on retained search, meaning they have a rec, they have a job description, we're aligning, we're finding them the best candidates out there. And when a company uses a retained recruiter as opposed to filling it themselves, their own network, or using talent acquisition internally at their company, they're really honing in on having us find the best person out there. And oftentimes we identify, we make this distinction between passive and active candidates. So a passive candidate is somebody who's not necessarily looking for a job. They're not on LinkedIn in the job section doing a search for a specific role. And so we reach out to people and we say, hey, we have an opportunity. Are you interested? And so, 90% of our work is really, we're trying to find the best person for a specific position. And so what Todd and Brian are recommending is to have that conversation with the recruiter to explore that opportunity, because you never know if it's a good next step, and it's also valuable to have that relationship with the recruiter.
Ellen, you make a great point. This between active and passive. Most of your outreach are to passive candidates. So, Brian, did you want to say something? I think I interrupted you.
I would add, if you don't have a mentor or you don't have someone that you can ask for a warm referral, you can easily just use the power of the internet to find a specific. Everyone here has an area of expertise or industry they're in. You can find out all the big firms and even the boutiques have all of their consultants on their website. You can sort it by geography, industry, and function, things of that nature. Then you can give a warm little reach out blindly on LinkedIn saying, hey, I want to become, in your network, but do your homework and don't just say, hey, I want 30 minutes of your time. We don't have 30 minutes to provide you, but you have a couple of hundred characters. I forget the exact number, 180 characters in your LinkedIn invite. If you could just put something, personalize it in some degree and just ask for nothing, just say, hey, I want to connect with you. If I could help you on any of your projects moving forward, or I just love to extend my network. And more times than not, we're gonna accept that if it's in our vertical, in our area and focus. So that might be helpful for others to try to gain some traction.
Thank you, Brian. And to your point about homework. So let's say I'm a candidate and I'm not a passive candidate. Our audience, we have some active candidates who are looking for a job. So how do I get on the radar of an executive recruiter? What can I do to put myself on that list of the hunted, so that I can get your attentions? What are some of the things beyond doing the homework, which I think is really important, but what are some of the other things that candidates could do to get your attention?
I do want to reiterate what Brian's saying about reaching out on LinkedIn. And anybody who's on the call today, if you reach out on LinkedIn to connect and say, saw you today on the webinar, and so that helps to make that connection. And then also to share, just to share your resume on LinkedIn or profile and just say, I'd love for you to keep me on your radar. I'll let Todd.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many different ways that you can stay on recruiters' radars. LinkedIn's been talked about, and that's, the most of the recruiting firms have their own database. So we've got, once we've made connection with someone, we've got, good information on someone and conversation history and things like that. but LinkedIn continues to be a really good vehicle to just showcase and market yourself. And again, even if you are passive or not looking at all, I think there's a lot of value in having a robust LinkedIn profile that you don't need to sort of cut and paste your resume. I don't think that's a great idea, but just sort of illuminating what you're doing today, some of the aspects of that. So if someone looks at your profile, they can have a sense of how you're spending your time and start to get a picture for both your interests and skill sets. I think that's really important. And I think just being systematic, maybe lastly, being systematic in your outreach and knowing that it doesn't need to be monthly or certainly, less frequently than that. But even if you're passive, just sort of reaching out, could be once every few quarters to just check in. You might not get a response depending on the busyness of the person you're reaching out to, but I think just having that discipline to keep up those connections is a good discipline.
I would also add, Elizabeth, that all of our firms, boutique and large, we have researchers and associates that are also very proactive in being in the market. The partners, which the three of us are, we rely heavily on our prior relationships, the candidates that are brought forth by our team, but we're also constantly looking to build additional relationships. So the way to be hunted, hunt versus being hunted, or increaser being hunted aspect, a lot of our researchers use the LinkedIn recruiter that has advanced AI. So you have to make sure that your profile has the areas, whether it's your buzzwords, you need to be current and up to date in that. Also, if you have a very difficult name to pronunciate, you can record it on LinkedIn, and a little speaker symbol will be next to your name. That might be helpful. Just all these little pieces to try to make sure you're following societies and you're following trade groups that are important. You can also follow, if you have a top 5 company that you want to work for, you can follow them and you can reach out to their talent acquisition. Just try your best to always be thoughtful. It wasn't built overnight. Spend a little bit every day or every other day. I mean, we're all still improving our profiles, and we've been on LinkedIn since the day it started. So it takes work a little at a time.
Thank you, Brian. And I'm so glad all of you.
Headshot. And professional, my last piece, not the cropped photo of you at the wedding from 8 years ago. Get a professional headshot. It's a great investment it's a low investment, but it'll really make your profile look better, more professional, and stand out.
Thank you. I think that is rich, and I really appreciate those comments because it's LinkedIn is the first channel that you go to. And so any other things that you want to add, Ellen? I don't know if you want to make comments about the LinkedIn profile. So we talked about the headshot and important key terms that you have to have in order to be found. Is there anything else that you would like to add in terms of the LinkedIn profile?
There is also engaging in LinkedIn to the community. So what you post, and we do look at candidates, especially the ones who are moving forward in the process, what they're engaging in on LinkedIn, who they're engaging with, how many, and also how many people we know in common. So it doesn't have to be an everyday activity, but just to stay pretty much current and active is valuable. And also to check your in-mail. There's a distinction between what you have, as a user, you can identify your email in different places. So one is if you want people to reach out to you, you use this email, and then the other is when you log in can be a different email, but just make sure that if somebody's sending you a message in your inbox that it's coming in, that you're able to see it in real time.
Thank you, Ellen. And Todd had mentioned not to just copy and paste your resume and, dump it into LinkedIn. And I think that's also a great point that Todd made. So we had a huge run last year with ChatGPT. It had I don't remember the number of users within a week, that it broke so many records. So, and we're all talking about automation and how do we use AI today and the impact it's having on industries and roles. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you're using AI in recruiting. Are you using it in search at all? And what should candidates use it? How should they use it? And how shouldn't they use it in their own job search? If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would jump in and say there's two different perspectives. From a company perspective, I think AI is going to have the most impact on staff level and middle management, right? So they're creating chat boxes, they're screening questions, doing screening videos, they're refining their position descriptions, they're doing resume parsing. So they're trying to reduce their time. An open requisite is open so that they can reduce their cost and just have a full slate of employees. On a candidate seeking perspective, it's a great way to really help refine your resume, but please always make sure you check what the Chat GPT or whatever AI you're using, because they like to sensationalize, right? If you put something in there, they come up with such a wordy sensationalization of what you've done, and that you just have to tone it down and make sure that it's exactly the right messaging that you're trying to provide. So and also I think it'll help candidates with competitive compensation. You'll be able to know what a role is paying at another organization. There's a lot of more transparency around compensation, and AI certainly be able to crack into that. So those are some areas, and it'll also help companies functionally go to adjacent industries to bring HR or finance, if there's functions that are not specific to their industry, it'll allow for things like that. But from a recruiting perspective, we have a team focused on it. Again, outside of that, I don't have a strategic course. I don't think it's not gonna replace us, because there's a lot of engagement around culture and competencies within an organization that you can't just rely on a computer to spit out. Otherwise, there's still a lot of hands-on consultative impact that executive search recruiters and search professionals provide. So it won't get rid of us. It'll just make it easier and quicker.
Yes, so there'll still be a human in the loop.
I think so.
Yes, thank you. And those are some great points about using it for, compensation data to get smart about compensation and working on your resume. Anything you, Todd or Ellen, want to add in terms of how you're using AI or how candidates should be using it?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd offer anything different than what Brian mentioned. I mean, we're just sort of at the beginning here at Spenser Stuart of integrating it into our process. So it's still pretty early days, but no, I wouldn't mention anything sort of different than what Brian did. I thought that was really good advice.
Right. Ellen?
Yeah, I do. I think we're at the early days of figuring it out, and and that will evolve over time. A hiring manager can say, here's my job description, find me candidates. They can do the job. They can ask AI to do the job. And I think LinkedIn is concerned about whether AI will replace LinkedIn. And their revenues could potentially go down in terms of you can seek resources other than LinkedIn to find candidates. So a hiring manager could say, here's my job description, find me people that could meet this need. I do notice the hyperbole where there's in terms of writing cover letters, because we just talked to hundreds of people or thousands of people, we've read thousands of cover letters, and I have noticed that in general, cover letters are getting more wordy, and I wonder, like, oh, did AI help this person write their cover letter? So there's recognizing that. And so I think just to be aware of how AI could be entering the process is just something to keep in mind, but also recognizing that it's evolving.
Okay. Well, one, I like the plug on cover letters, that they're still important and that you read them. So I think that's a really great point to make to our audience, that people are still reading cover letters, and that AI is meant to be a framework and to help you, but you should write in your own style and put in your own words and accomplishments. So thank you for that.
You know,
So a lot.
that brings up a one last little piece that's a lost art. I generally, rule of thumb, I don't encourage candidates. I don't bring up or coach them to send thank you letters. I think it needs to be natural. And so it's a lost art, and employers and executive leadership teams still want to see it. And the follow-up is essential. So please make sure through your interview process that you send a thank you note. It's a must do.
That's a great point, Brian. And you're right. We don't talk about that often enough, of candidates writing thank you notes. So I'm glad you brought that up as well. So some of our audience are experienced and have a lot of experience, and maybe are contemplating changing careers, making a pivot. Are executive recruiters a great channel for making those career changes? And if they're not, are there any tips that you can give people who are contemplating a career change?
The pivot is challenging because you're I mean, to me, the idea of a pivot is that you don't want to make a 180 pivot. It's usually in little steps. And so that each time that you're making a shift, I do think an MBA and a degree is a great opportunity to make a pivot. And you can use what you're studying at SOM. This is for the active. I know we've got a lot of alums that have graduated SOM some years ago on the call. But if you're currently there, then you can use that opportunity and what you're studying to make a shift. And so the value of so in terms of making that shift, it's recognizing what you're giving to this new opportunity, what experience you have in your background that will support you in this new role or this new shift. And so it's not like you want to just throw away everything of your past and make this complete change. And so that's the one piece about making the shift that I recommend explaining to hiring managers and to recruiters, is how valuable what you've been doing in the past is going to be helping you in this new endeavor that you're seeking.
Thank you, Ellen. And I think you make a great point that pivots sometimes you take them in small steps. It's not necessarily one step and you make the change. So I think that's a great point as well. Brian, did you want to say something?
No, I mirror what Ellen said. The pivot is always difficult as it relates to executive search. Our clients typically don't engage us to find pivot candidates unless it's very specific, saying, we need a breath of fresh air, let's go to a different industry. So an example, in healthcare, they're not great at marketing, they're not great at consumer engagement. And so we'll go out of industry to bring those individuals. And so for that individual would represent a pivot of industry. But typically speaking, it's a little bit more difficult. So you got to really be very strategic in your outreach and how you navigate that.
Okay. Thank you. Todd, did you want to say something or add to that?
No, I don't know that I have anything really innovative to add to that. I think there can be opportunities to do it, but they're probably, as Brian said, more infrequent. And if probably the better vehicle is sort of networking as opposed to sort of going through a recruiter, because as Brian said, it's usually we're hired for a very specific set of things, whereas a networked search through your contacts and at an organization could unlock sort of that kernel that suggests that they're open to people sort of doing a pivot along the way.
Yes, I think that's a great point. Use your network with these pivots. So we've been talking a little bit about how to engage with recruiters. What are some of the things you should do? What are some of the common mistakes people make when reaching out to recruiters that they should avoid? What are some of the things that are maybe your pet peeve when people reach out to you? Anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
I'll start. I think there's probably lots of things in this category. Maybe some of them will overlap between the three of us here. I would say, personalize your outreach to a recruiter, and I think I'll certainly get many a day where that you can sort of tell it was a cut and a paste. Might not even sort of have my name at the top. It might say something like "Dear Recruiter," that typically does not sort of grab one's attention or maybe engender a response. And I would say that comes to mind first and foremost. But then secondly, some others had mentioned this as well. Do your research on the areas of focus for the person that you're reaching out to. And I'll get so much outreach that's just nowhere kind of connected to the work that I do. And so it's usually just a couple clicks away to figure out what sectors they play in, where they spend their time, and just being thoughtful about that. I always personally really like it when someone reaches out that's done the research, it's a personalized note, and they say something, "I'm not sure if you're working on anything right now. I'd love to stay on your radar on the in the medium or longer term," and just sort of have a relationship. And it's not this sort of call for we need to speak in 2 days, but let's just sort of be in touch over quarters as opposed to days or weeks. Those are the ones that sort of like really catch my attention and kind of show me that the person on the other side of the phone or email kind of knows what they've done the research and know what they're talking about.
Thank you.
I would just, yeah, I couldn't agree more. How many times my name has been spelled incorrectly, or it's the wrong industry. And on my LinkedIn profile, I'm very specific on what I do and where I work and where I swim. So if an individual hasn't been able to do their homework to that extent to understand where I am, then I don't even have the time to respond. I just click ignore on the LinkedIn invites.
Yes. Thank you. So personalization and do your homework.
And then I'd like to add that recognizing that recruiters are working specifically on positions that we've been retained. Our clients are the companies, the employers. And so we are working on these specific positions, and we're trying to find the best person for these specific positions. I often get outreach saying, "Hey, you're a recruiter. I want help on my job search." And you're not my client. The candidate is not, the job seeker is not my client. The employer is my client. And so it is a very different relationship and rapport. The way to reach out is to just say, "I want to stay on your radar, please keep me in mind." But it's not I refer them to coaches. If you want help on your job search, go to the CDO or retain a coach who can help you on your job search, but that's not our job.
That's a great point, Ellen.
I would add to that, especially individuals that work with a recruiter for the first time, they don't realize or understand that we're not a transactional being, right? So being fully transparent, gaining and building rapport and trust, we want to know everything. We can't by law ask you certain things, but it's helpful we know. We should know about your family. If you're trying to return back to mom because she has health problems in Arizona. If you have a trailing spouse that has a role that needs to be thoughtful or accounted for, you can't sell your house because you're underwater, but you would co-locate and get an apartment if there's enough compensation associated with the increase. We can't ask direct compensation, but provide a range that you're looking for. Most people do give it to us because they don't want to waste the time. Say, "Hey, I'm not going to accept less than X. I'm at X now. I'm looking for an improvement." No one makes a change for less than usually 15%. That's a minimum, right? So where do you need to be? What does that look like? Are you flexible? You could have 3 mortgages and you can't flex on your base, but You might be more open for equity or pay for performance and throw it into my bonus. So the more you're transparent and open with, we're not just going to turn around and spouse all that to our client, but we're going to understand where to navigate, how to navigate it, when to bring it up, find information, make sure it's thoughtful, because our clients do come to us and say, all right, we're ready to go to offer with Johnny or Sally. Where do you think they need to be? And we understand what a waste of time is, what's a good number. So it just really helps the whole process. The more we know about the individual, their family, and where they would like to be or can't be, then that just is more efficient.
Thank you. I think you had said at the beginning of this talk, this is a marathon and it's about relationship building. So even in your outreach, it's not those relationships take time to cultivate, and just remember that. And I think that's what our panelists are emphasizing again and again. So we have a couple of questions from our audience, but I do have one last question for you in terms of your advice. So what one piece of job search advice would you, if someone followed, would you think would have the biggest impact on their results? If there's one piece of advice that you can give on job search.
I would say one piece of advice is to just be very systematic about your relationship building. I think, and that I say both in the context of, if you're doing a job search today or in the future, and by systematic, I mean, and we often encounter people who have either left something on their own accord, or maybe they've been part of a downsizing. And so we'll intersect with them at this unique moment in time. And the advice that I'll often give them is activate your network and be as systematic about that as you can, whether it's people that you know or that you need to get, have a friend sort of connect you to them. And to distill that even further, have as many conversations as you can. And whether that's in an organization that you're interested in, or an industry, I think you'll be surprised of just the reception that you'll get from, of course, you won't have everyone that gets back to you from cold outreach, but if you get connected through someone in your network, that can activate it, and cold can work as well. And having as many conversations as you can, if you are interested in a particular company or industry, I think, you sort of sum all that together, and it can lead to opportunities and roles that maybe aren't published or maybe aren't coming through a recruiter. So that's advice that I give to job seekers, quite a bit along the way.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I like to recommend keeping a spreadsheet. When you say systematic, I mean, very specifically, it's keeping a spreadsheet. Who are you reaching out to? So you've got a column with an X for each person you reach out to, and how many conversations are you having? And it's usually about, I'd say, one, and pay attention to the percentage of. So if 1 out of 3 outreaches turns into a conversation, that's pretty good. And also, if it's full-time, where you are looking for a job full-time, like that is your main focus, 4 months is a pretty good amount of time. And I mean, it depends on the economy and industry, but that's just a back of the envelope time frame. And also, my advice in the past has been to identify 3 paths and to continually revisiting those paths and continue honing in on what those 3 are. So it might be, I mean, it's not going to, it's more like where you're really honing in, where it's like, okay, I'm looking at consulting or going in-house. I'm looking at going at a big shop or a small shop. And so it's just to articulate for yourself what it is that you're seeking, and so that you're able to be more clear. Because at the end of the day, you want a job that's going to bring something to you and your professional development. And at the same time, as I had shared about the pivot, is that when what your past experience is helping this employer get to their help them meet their goals.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, so just like you're doing homework on the recruiters, you're doing homework on yourself and understanding the value you bring to the table and get more, and as you get more specific, the more successful your job search will be. So we have a couple of questions that, so we're going to go back to a couple of topics, but one of our questions is, would the panelists come back to the topic on data sources for compensation ranges? I think, Brian, you mentioned ChatGPT. Are there any other sources you'd recommend when you're doing a job search and want to know sort of the compensation ranges?
Well, the recruiter will know what industry standard is for the range in title and function and where you're looking to go. But most sources are going to be some type of paid source, right? Executive pay and governance is a very large industry, and all the bigs have service lines in that area, and they get very granular. And also now, because of pay transparency, most job postings have to provide a range. But also ranges are a slippery slope. And what I mean by that, if they're saying that the range is between 175 and 250, no candidate looking at that say, you know what, I'm going to take the 175. They're going to say, I'm worth 250. The reality is they're not giving you the full range, right? Because everyone's going to walk and say they want 250. So there's always upward room on these ranges. You didn't hear that from me, because, we don't ever want to shoot ourselves in the foot, or a client or an organization doesn't want to either.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else?
And Glassdoor is definitely a good resource, for free from a candidate perspective.
That's a good point.
Great point. Thank you. There was actually a question for you, Ellen, about your sustainability roles. The audience wanted to know what specific roles you recruit for and what differentiates candidates as you're looking at them. What makes them stand out?
Right. So you can go to weinrebgroup.com for our active positions. And our biggest clients are Estee Lauder, Mars, and KKR, where we've done about 10 or so searches for, and for a boutique firm, that's pretty big for us. And so there's a lot of consumer-facing product companies, Dow Chemicals or Waste Management, Walmart, Patagonia. I mean, we've got a lot of clients that are consumer-facing or retail. In terms of, we often are looking for the leadership, the head of, but also in terms of filling sustainability positions, there's a lot of shifts in the regulatory framework, requirements out of Europe. And so there's more data that's needed that needs to be audited and verified. And so that is one level of expertise in the last year and two that we've been looking for candidates that come specifically with that knowledge.
Thank you. Brian and Todd, did you want to add anything in terms of what you're seeing different in your industries in terms of the roles and, the skill set that you're looking for that might be new?
I don't know about new. Empathy is always very high up there, especially from a leadership perspective, given the macro workforce challenges of working remotely and leading teams. Authentic, right? Most organizations, when we bring candidates through the process, you have your standard behavioral-based interview questions to try to get a sense of what the person has accomplished and what they're bringing to the table. But it's what's not spoken. It's the soft skills. It's the authentic nature. Are they clear? Are they concise? Are they driven? Are they aligned with the mission? And if none of that, they're just here to, a turnaround or increase growth or make more profit. All that is also pretty good. It doesn't always have to be tied to a mission, but being authentic and transparent about that definitely reads well in an interview.
Thank you. And I think you're highlighting the importance of the softer skills as you become more senior, because the assumption is you have the technical skills and now the softer skills take center stage as you go up in your seniority. Todd, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't think
you're
I've added anything
seeing?
else. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
May I turn the mic around to Elizabeth? You've worked internally at GE on talent acquisition. So what advice do you have to the audience in terms of working with recruiters and the and talent ac and maybe the difference there?
Thank you. Well, I think my advice is pretty similar to everyone on the panel. I think you have to do your homework. If you're applying to a company directly, you still should do your homework and be prepared for all your interviews. That means looking up the bios of everyone you're meeting, understanding who you're meeting, tailoring your questions to the person that you're meeting. Doing your research on the company, what's happening in the company, looking at the news, any deals that are happening, because they might ask you if you know what's going on. And so it's important to do your homework about the company and how it's being impacted even by competitors. So again, just like you've mentioned, do your homework. Also networking. You know, I think the percentage is about 20% of employees get hired through referrals. So that's a pretty high percentage. So don't just apply directly, try to find people within these companies that are either part of your alumni network or within your professional network and do outreach. Thank you, Ellen, for turning around. Let's see what other questions they have.
And another thing to just you touched on this for a second, and I don't think we were addressed it yet around the hybrid. And last year we were kind of honing in on expectations to be in the office 3 days a week, and it was really hybrid to 3 days a week. And now we're hearing hybrid okay for rural positions, but there's a lot of 3 days a week, but there's also expectations of, we want you back in the office 5 days a week. And I'm in the Bay Area, which is known, San Francisco is the worst in terms of getting in the office. My husband another SOM alum goes in the office 1 day a week, and San Francisco's dead. And the tech industry is not getting their employees in the office 3 days a week. So it definitely is also industry related as well.
Specific. Yeah. Todd and Brian, do you want to comment on that, on the remote, not remote? Because I know we've certainly seen a lot of press on the financial services side. A lot of the CEOs want people back in the office. So we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's definitely trending back towards more in office than not. It's a generalization, of course, and some organizations are much more prescribed on that than others. But the sort of overall trend that I'm seeing is absolutely sort of at a minimum 3, and we're seeing many clients go to 4 days, sort of with the expectation that if you go to 4 days, there's with flexibility, meaning that there's going to be need to be flexibility, given how people's lives have changed over the last 3-4 years. But we're definitely seeing that trend of sort of more in office versus less. But it doesn't mean that there's not other organizations we work with that will continuously be flexible. That's just the trend we're seeing right now.
Okay. Are you seeing the same, Brian?
Yeah, healthcare is slightly different too, right? Because a lot of it's all about the culture of the organization, right? They flexed and trended with the flex in order to have access to better talent. Organizations who are insular, geographically specific, can only then expose themselves to individuals in their region or willing to relocate to the region. And over the last couple of years, that was very limiting. So the organizations that relaxed those requirements found themselves access to much stronger talent. But now the yo-yo effect's coming back around. It's also the generation of workforce below the senior leaders. They don't have the culture and engagement, and organizations are losing their identity as it relates to culture. So trending back to coming in to some extent, whatever that might look like, however they define it, is essential for building the next generation and increasing productivity of the organization. So we're seeing, it's, of course, there's anecdotes and outliers, but we're seeing the desire to come back, however that might be defined.
Wow. Well, that's certainly a huge development when people have gotten so used to working remotely and people have uprooted their lives and moved. So we will see how that continues to play out as the geopolitical and macro markets change, because those have a big impact on all of those decisions. I think we have 3 more minutes and we have a question, so I am going to give you the question. Since recruiters are retained by employers, does it benefit candidates to be fully transparent on their current compensation? Seems that the recruiter is not aligned with the candidate in maximizing compensation. Anyone want to take that question?
Sure, I did answer it to the individual as well. I'm always falling on the side of full transparency. Unless you have an inkling that you're grossly underpaid, then it might strategically behoove you to stay quiet on the topic. But generally speaking, also keep in mind the role we're talking to you about, although it might be the current conversation, we work on many other roles and we have constant conversations, ideation with clients on creation of roles or looking at succession. And the more we know about you, then we're not going to approach you at X minus 20%. But we're gonna, and we are aligned. We're also we try to quarterback everything, right? We try to set expectations. A candidate could say, "Hey, listen, I want to go from 300 to 600." We say, "Pump the brakes. Why do you feel you have value of doubling your salary?" Or the client could say, "Hey, listen, I know we talked to you about 400. We're going to offer that person 350." We could say, "Whoa, that's below market. That's not. You're not going to get that individual." So, I know there might be a common, anecdotally, people might, we do work for our clients, but we're also here to make sure there's a successful attraction of the right person for the organization, and that often could be above the compensation range. But if put appropriately, it could be spot on the same. So I would err on the side of transparency. I don't know about you and Todd and Ellen, what your thoughts are.
I would like to add there's the base, there's bonus, and then there's a total comp long-term incentive. And oftentimes candidates really aren't paying attention to how much money do I have. And so it's good to check in online, what's the value of your long-term incentive, and to share that information with the employer, because it hurts everybody if all of this information comes out much later in the process. So the more you know and the more you share upfront very early on in the process, the more it helps everyone.
Wonderful. Transparency. Todd, any last comments you want to make? Or
No, I would echo that as well. I mean, I think the transparency theme is one that I agree with, and I think there's value on both sides. So I think it's a good thing to sort of have in the back of your mind.
Thank you. Well, thank you for all those wonderful nuggets of information. I think they've been extremely helpful. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next year.